Teachers of Reddit, what is the most disrespectful thing a student has done or said? I'm a male teacher, and after I graduated from college I got a job teaching kids around 11-12 years old. One day, one kid thought that it would be fun to move his classmate's chair so he would fall when he tried to sit down. This happened while I was writing something on the board. As soon as I heard a noise I turned my head, and the victim proceeded to kick the other kid as if he was in a Jackie Chan's movie. This happened in a matter of seconds before I could even get close to them. I must add that the kid who kicked the other one was the tallest and strongest kid in the classroom. He was even taller than me. I took them to the principal's office and explained the situation to her. She suggested that I return to the classroom. No more than 5 minutes after I came back to my classroom, another student took his pencil and stabbed the hand of another student because he put it on his desk. I tell you, I still can hear the voice of that kid screaming. I took him to the nurse's office, while another teacher took the other kid to the principal's office. When I'm making sure that my student got medical attention, I went to the principal's office. She told me that the 3 kids, the one who moved the chair, the one who kicked, and the one who used his pencil as a weapon, were going to get suspended one day because the spelling competition was in 2 days and they couldn't miss it. I was told how incompetent I was, and that if the school got in troubles I was going to be fired. I went to the bathroom and I tried to calm down. I had worked so hard with these kids to make them enjoy learning, but their attitude was always discouraging to me, and I thought that day was more than I could handle. I came back to my classroom feeling overwhelmed, and then this happened. Kids, we need to respect each other. You come to the school to learn and have fun. PFF. Are you going to cry? Teacher, the kid who kicked his classmate. My voice just cracked. I got out the classroom and started crying. That was the first and I hope the last time I cried in the school. I still get sad when I remember that story. TL. Dr. A kid asked if I was going to cry after having a terrible day. I guess it doesn't sound that bad, but you should have been there. Internet hugs, kids are jerks. Not a teacher, but I'll always remember these 2 stories. There was a kid that obviously came from a bad home who was a monster in class. Rude, disruptive, destructive, but actually not a bad person at all when he was calm. He saw a news article showing kids starving and getting bombed in Palestine once, and started crying for them. He shared his lunch with anyone who forgot theirs. He would also turn up with bruises and black eyes from his butthole older brothers and dad. Anyway, the teacher was obviously new and optimistic because she really tried hard to connect with and take care of him. She tried to spend extra time with him for classwork, tried new ways to detract him so he wouldn't destroy crap. He pulled out all the class plants and left them on her desk. We were heartbroken, and at the end of the year, in a ham-fisted attempt to instill some pride into him, awarded him with my favorite student of the year award and a beautiful little crystal pen. This didn't stop him from throwing the pen on the floor, breaking it, and calling her a W. This was in front of the whole 7th grade class and their parents, and the look of utter defeat on her face was, I feel he'd broken her then. Like she realized it would take more than a year of 9-3 weekly care to fix up 9 years of neglect and abuse. The other one was a girl drew a picture of our very overweight English teacher that showed her drowning in her enormous boobs while stuck in a manhole. The teacher walked past and happened to see it and just burst into tears. Like proper crisis tears. She ran out of the room and the student had to apologize to her for being disrespectful. Turns out the teacher was in the middle of a divorce at the time. Not a teacher, but work with behavioral kids. I had a white kid, who was quite young. Call me N. I'm white, but my colleague who overheard it was not. I've got some better examples. That was the first one that came to mind, mostly because of the amount of confusion it caused me. Felt awful for my colleague. A couple more for you. 1. I've been told to go kill myself. This doesn't offend me that much as I've never struggled with those thoughts, but it's an area where half the kids are there for behavioral reasons and the other half for suicidal ideation. So I felt bad for the other kids who overheard it. 2. I've been called fat ugly many times, but that didn't bother me either since I'm not really fat nor ugly, at least yet. 3. I've had several kids make some rendition of wanting to copulate with my mother, said they were going to kill my family, etc. etc. To be honest, Only the confusing ones stand out since you hear them so often it just has absolutely no effect. They're the ones with the problems. I'm just doing my job and enforcing rules. I have a reputation at work as being strict, and the kids react pretty harshly to it at first, before they eventually start improving. Tough love works. I teach in a high needs, rural district. It's hard to pick a single story. After Trump won, the students spent weeks determined to get me angry because they suspected I voted for Clinton. Several students have mocked my baldness to my face. Eye rolls when introducing any music they haven't heard before are just par for the course. A student once called Beethoven's Fifth crappy sad music. I replaced a veteran teacher, and for a while, anytime I did literally anything they would all say, "That's not how Ms. X did it." No one except me seems to realize that Ms. X was a terrible teacher. I could go on. Most of them aren't that bad as isolated incidents, but dang, they build up over time. Student, not teacher. My middle school science teacher was a real piece of crap. He picked favorites constantly and was always hitting on the girls, but only the attractive ones. And all the girls he hit on were getting crazy grades when all they'd do is frick around dying class and flirt back with him. Just a crap teacher in general. Saw him when we were on vacation after we moved schools and he was like, "Hey, how's it going at new school?" And I just said, "It's nice that I'm actually learning something every day in science class." Now that I think about it, mom and dad weren't happy with me, but they understood. It doesn't matter where it was because there's always going to be the crappy teacher. Sooner or later life will catch up with all the shit they've gotten away with. I'm a female with short hair, which doesn't always fly with Hispanic kids. One day I was telling the kids that they really needed to try and leave their drama outside the classroom and come in here ready to learn. I think I said something about, "Girls, you can't always be thinking about your boyfriends. You have to think about your future," or something like that. One girl sneered, "Miss, I thought you were on the other team," as in, she was calling me a lesbian. I just said, "But you don't know for sure, do you? Because I don't bring my personal drama into the classroom." She did at least shut up after that. 10/10 response. Off the top of my head, just generally not understanding that I also need a break or can get sick. We just got back from winter break. I had 2/3 of everyone's exams graded, but still had a third to go. Student, why don't I have my exam grade? Me, I will have the rest graded tonight. We just had winter break. Shouldn't I get some downtime too? Student, number, they have the same attitude if I get sick. I generally try to be polite and help instill empathy in my students, while understanding they are still developing as people and are used to being selfish. But sometimes it just breaks my heart that they don't see me as a person. In grade 5 there was this kid that had real issues. He was constantly acting up and probably never did any work at all. He used to tell teachers to kill themselves, go frick themselves, etc. But the worst one was when he got really upset with one of the most lovely female teachers who was being completely level-headed with him and just trying to calm him down. Her hand was flat on the table when he grabbed a compass, circle drawing tool, not navigational aid, and stabbed it as hard as he could through her hand. Dunno if that counts as disrespectful, but it sure as heck isn't nice. My second story is much more recent and I kind of had a part in it maybe. I have a close mate, let's call him Jim. We go to a Catholic school and he's basically given up on school at this point. We had to do an English presentation speech thing and he was up next and hadn't prepared anything. I told him to just write on the board something offensive and sit back down. I didn't think the madman would do it. He got called up and immediately wrote, "I don't want to do a freaking speech on the board," and I crap you not. The teacher didn't even look up to see it. Jim just stood there awkwardly waiting for her to notice. She didn't. He then read what was on the board. "I don't want to do a freaking speech." The teacher didn't seem fazed by this though, and made him make up a speech on the spot anyway. Now, despite having given up on school, Jim isn't a dumb kid. His speech was good, probably one of the better ones out of the class. At the end of the speech, I guess he was emboldened by the teacher's lack of reaction, but he decided to get even crazier. "Frick you. Frick the education system. Donald Trump can suck my dong. Frick the Catholic Church. That crazy mother actually fricking said that crap. And the best part is that saying frick the Catholic Church automatically nullified his enrollment in the school. I almost felt sorry for him, but also he totally deserved it. Crazy but motherfucking Jim. When I was in high school, we had a kid who was on the football team with me and was also a wrestler and kind of an angry, clowny type. In Spanish class, he'd just answer with an English word with an O on the end of it, like, Mexico is going to compra the wall and stupid crap like that. Well, one day he got a bad grade on a test or something and he went to the teacher during class to argue it and she wouldn't change his grade, so he got P. I remember he said like, that's bulls or something, and she kicked him out. It was a whole scene where as he's walking out, she stops him and says to give her back the paper so she can have it as evidence, and he tells her no. She demands it and he's just like, frick you. See, so I remember pretty clearly she was standing behind her desk, one of those big metal teacher jobs with the drawers on either side, and it was covered in stacks of papers and she just stands there, all 5 feet 4 inches of her, hands on her hips, and she goes, my, aren't you a charming boy? He walks up to the desk, tries once to flip it and it doesn't go. So he gives it another flip and the desktop and then she goes and tries to grab his backpack to get the paper back, and he slumps it off his shoulder, swings with everything he has and just slams her in the chest with the bag. She falls down and he turns around and punches the reinforced glass, cracking it and probably his hand too, before he walks out and slams the door. So after class, I stayed and helped pick up the papers and make sure the teacher was okay and everything. She was pretty shaken up, but no major damage. The next day, or like, a couple days later, I get called out of class to go to the AP's office and I'm rolling my eyes. Like, WTF did I do now? I was a clown and in trouble a lot, too. That particular Spanish class was one I acted up in a lot and the teacher and I didn't really get along. So they call me into the office and my AP and the Spanish teacher are there and I'm like, WTF. Turns out that I was the only student who stayed around to help her out and she wanted to thank me personally and let me know how much she appreciated it and blah blah blah. Also turns out that she was like 11 weeks pregnant and had to go to the hospital after the incident. Kevin got expelled from the school district and brought up on charges. He called me to ask me to lie for him in court and then got all mad when I wouldn't. So, that's my tale. My biology teacher offered a huge extra credit Saturday project. Huge as in my grade went from a D+ to a B mid-semester. Out of his 4 classes of 30 students, I was the only one to show up. When he saw I was the only one to show, I could tell he was defeated, so I did my best to pay attention to the field walkthrough I knew he planned for many students. Every time he asked for questions, I made sure to at least ask something. He was an awkward dude, but I always thought he was fair and had a great sense of humor. We spent 2 hours looking at plants and insects. He thanked me for coming out and he and my dad had a good conversation when he picked me up. The next Monday he had me write up all the notes I took on the chalkboard from our excursion. He favored me after that Saturday and I tried really hard for him. A couple years after I graduated, I saw him in a grocery store and said, hello Mr. Teacher, and he said, hi Mr. Plaid Cloud, how are things? I told him school wasn't for me and I was trying to sort my life out. He told me education isn't confined to school and he knew I'd turn out alright in the end. This wasn't the response for the post, but I wanted to share my little story for teachers who feel they aren't connecting. Kids are weird. Sometimes it takes a while for your lessons to be learned. Thank you. During study hall, a girl was playing rap music with explicit lyrics from her laptop. Told her to turn it off and she wouldn't. Told her to go to the principal's office and she wouldn't. Knowing that I could get in big trouble if another faculty member caught wind of it, I reached over her shoulder and pressed the mute button on her laptop. She then accused me of touching her and threatened to have her stepfather beat me up. After all the students got on the bus to go home, I went right to the vice principal and told him everything. He took my side, and because of the girl's prior track record, she got threatened with being transferred to a reform school. I don't really know what happened to her after that. God, she was such white trash. My mom was an elementary school teacher for 35 years, and the worst student she ever had was a 4th grade girl who didn't like the fact that she got a bad grade on an assignment. So the little girl decided to tell her parents that her teacher was hitting her, abusing her. The situation escalated because the parents believed their daughter. They threatened to sue the school, and the district threatened to fire my mom. But then, in the middle of the whole fiasco, the girl admitted that she was lying about the whole thing. My mom received no apology whatsoever from the parents or the district, and the girl was moved out of her class. I gave up on my teaching career 30 years ago, but my father started teaching in the 1950s, and he was teaching science at Oak Ridge public schools, like chemistry and physics and stuff, to the children of nuclear physicists who were building the nuclear weapons of the Cold War. And this was in the age of yo-yos, pet rocks, poodle skirts, etc. The teachers forbade the use of yo-yos in class. The school issued an edict, no yo-yos. Still, the yo-yos came out whenever a teacher's back was turned. My father slipped a pair of scissors up his sleeve, and he walked around his classroom, up and down the aisles, lecturing, and whenever he encountered a surreptitious yo-yo, he snipped it. Now, I suppose if this had been modern times, and yo-yos were smartphones, he might be in trouble. As it was, he was a hero, and the kids whose yo-yos he snipped, they adored him. After he died, a number of them came to visit my mother and offered their condolences. Most of them were engineers, physicists, and chemists, after all, because, you know, without the distraction, they really were gifted individuals. I was a long-term substitute in a 9th grade English class right after finishing grad school, and this one kid was just awful every day. He was supposed to be a senior, so he was 3-4 years older than the youngest freshman. I'd been told by the administration that he was not, under any circumstances, to go to the bathroom unaccompanied by an adult. So when he asked to go to the bathroom, I said, sure, but you have to wait for Mr. X to come get you. Instead of waiting, he leaned back in his desk, stared directly in my eyes, and said, frick you, B. I have to go now. He peed his pants while making full eye contact with me. I didn't know what to do, but there was no way I was letting him out of the room after that stunt. So I just kept teaching like it was any other normal class. When he realized I was going to make him sit there in his pee pants, he got real embarrassed. It was one of those moments when you watch someone instantly regret their actions. I loved every minute between him pee himself and the principal coming to escort him to the office. He was suspended and dropped out shortly thereafter. The funny thing is, I actually liked the kid. He tried to establish dominance and horribly failed. My wife was a special ed teacher for a couple years. One kid threw tables and chairs and tried to stab my wife with scissors. He had been institutionalized the year before, but the parents were best friends with the principal, so he was fine to be in class. And if she sent him to the principal, he would just become her little helper buddy and not get any punishment. My wife finally quit because she couldn't take it anymore, and she didn't know she was pregnant yet. 3 weeks later, the kid beat the principal to a pulp with a metal baseball bat. She had to quit because she couldn't physically work anymore. My brother was a math teacher, and he took a job in a rural school in a third world country a few years ago and ended up becoming the principal. It was a really poor school, so sometimes my brother and other teachers would bring food for some of the students. He had to drive to kids' houses if they were absent too long to check if they were okay, cause these families had a lot of problems with abuse and addiction. Once he bought 2 pairs of shoes for 3 siblings who would take turns to come to school cause they only had 1 pair of shoes. I'm mentioning this just to contextualize the poverty in the school and the kind of work my brother did. One day he is about to leave the school and his car has been keyed. They wrote FG and CHNK all over the car. A few days later, when he was dropping off some teachers in a bus stop, he was one of the few people who had a car, so he would pick up and drop off teachers every day. A student waited for him at the next red light and got in the car. He had forgotten to lock the passenger side. The kid told him not to look at him and he put a gun to my brother's side as he continued driving. The kid stole his wallet, some change he had lying around the car, and opened his briefcase to see if there was anything of value. There was nothing but pens and pencils for the kids, attendance sheets and some tests he had to mark. So he left it in the car. The kid told him to stop, got off, and ran away. My brother didn't tell anyone except our family, because the kid was the elder brother of the kids he had bought shoes for. A few semesters ago I was in a human geography class. I'm assuming one of my peers complained about my professor. He came into class, handed out our in-class assignment and then starts talking very loudly at that individual. He told the student to leave the classroom. She said, "No, I pay for this, so I'm going to learn." He gets frustrated and storms out. He comes back in about 5 minutes later and says, "You need to leave. I am your professor, telling you to get out." She continuously says no. Oddly enough, he comes back in and starts lecturing. I guess he notices the individual and tell her to leave, but she refuses. He storms out again saying, "I am going to the head of the department." Mans comes back 5 minutes later, alone, and starts lecturing like nothing ever happened. My high school history teacher was known for being a pretty slow grader, but a pretty awesome teacher that always had an Irish proverb ready. Senior year I took an AP class with him, and during our very first Socratic seminar we were asking him when our essay would be graded. He said, "Come on Ike's, by now you should be used to my grading methods," and I responded with, "So next semester." Then the entire class started doing and I immediately regretted my decisions. But he laughed it off and said he'd get me back. I think the last thing he said to me before I graduated was, "You be you." Love that guy. When I was a GTA in grad school I had a freshman girl skip 4 straight off lab after our midterm. I figured she had just dropped the class knowing she bombed that exam and there wasn't much hope to do well. So 4 weeks later I get an email from her asking if we can meet during my office hours that week. That there was a serious family emergency and she wanted to explain her absences. The next day she comes to my office door, knocks, walks in immediately, asks if she can shut the door behind her. This wasn't allowed in our department, but as she turns to look at me I see tears forming and she starts to cry uncontrollably. So I shut the door and we sit. She tells me her mother was killed in a car crash and she has 2 younger sisters, 12 and 16 years old, that were now living with her in her campus apartment, and that she was going back and forth to Richmond, VA, where she was from, to appear in custody court to fight against their father for custody of her sisters. She tells me he was a major drug and alcohol abuser and her mom and the 3 girls had left him several years prior because of how crappy of a guy he was. She's crying the entire time, barely getting out the words. Of course I feel absolutely awful and I'm trying to say things to make her feel better. She brings up making up the labs, quizzes and assignments she had missed and I happily agree to let her make everything up. We finish our meeting and she leaves. Fast forward to that night. I'm at a local bar with the younger professor in our department having a couple beers. This guy just happened to be her professor for the lecture portion of the lab I taught, so I bring it up. I tell him what happened in my office and his jaw literally hits the bar. After he asked me what time she and I talked, he tells me that she immediately left my office, walked to his office and tells him that she had been in the hospital for a month with a torn stomach lining. All lies. My mind was blown. I think she figured out that we were onto her because she never once showed up for my lab again. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.